When you're comparing the literature poems, remember to use PEE paragraphs to compare the subject matter, main themes, viewpoint and tone or mood linked to the key words in the question. However, it is most important to compare the form, structure and language techniques used by the poets to express their ideas. The analogy of a house may help you to remember the different techniques used by poets. Now, houses can be built in many different forms, such as a bungalow, detached, mansion, flats. Similarly, poets make careful decisions about the form of their poems, such as a sonnet or a dramatic monologue. And they may use free verse or rhyme, or formal rhythms such as iambic pentameter. To continue our house analogy, the structure of houses can vary considerably. For example, there may be a different number of rooms of different shapes in varied layouts on different floors of the building. In the same way, the structure of poems can vary. There may be 3 long stanzas of 6 lines each with a final stanza of 2 lines. The lines may be short, long, some repeated, and so on and so on. And finally, we can't live very comfortably in an empty house, so they are full of furniture. Likewise, poems are full of language and imagery to express meaning or to convey a particular mood, attitude, or atmosphere. Hitcher, Simon Armitage. I'd been tired, under the weather, but the answer phone kept screaming, "One more sick note, mister, and you've finished fired." I thumbed a lift to where the car was parked. Vauxhall Astra. It was hired. I picked him up in Leeds. He was following the sun to west from east with just a toothbrush and the good earth for a bed. The truth, he said, was blowing in the wind or round the next bend. I let him have it on the top road out of Harrogate. Once with a head, then 6 times with a crook lock in the face, and didn't even swerve. I dropped it into third and leant across to let him out and saw him in the mirror bouncing off the curb, then disappearing down the verge. We were the same age, give or take a week. He'd said he liked the breeze to run its fingers through his hair. It was 12 noon. The outlook for the day was moderate to fair. Stitch that, I remember thinking. You can walk from there.
Hitcher by Simon Armitage is on page 45 of your anthology. This poem is a monologue of sorts in which a man confesses to murder. We notice that he is at once like and yet unlike his victim. Briefly, the speaker in the poem has been taking time off work, feigning illness and not answering his phone. Being threatened with the sack, he goes into work again. He gets a lift to his hired car. As he drives out of Leeds, he picks up a hitchhiker who is travelling light and has no set destination. Some little way later, coming out of Harrogate, he attacks his passenger and throws him out of the still-moving car. The last he sees of the hiker, he is bouncing off the curb, then disappearing down the verge. We do not know if he is dead or just badly injured. The driver does not care. The 2 men have some things in common. Both hitch lifts, and they are more or less of the same age. Can you think of anything else? On the other hand, they differ in lots of ways. One hitches to a specific place for a specific reason. The other is following the sun. One is going to work, the other appears not to work. One navigates by town and city names, the other by points of the compass. One is a victim of his work, the other has a carefree attitude. One learns about weather from the forecast, the other loves sun and wind. The contrast also appears in the way the men speak. The driver repeats the language of the weather forecast. For example, moderate to fair, and the driver speaks of dropping into third, while the hitcher uses hippie cliches about the good earth as his bed, about the truth in the words of Bob Dylan's song Blowing in the Wind, and even a metaphor of the breeze running its fingers through his hair. The driver is quite materialistic. He refers to the answer phone, the Vauxhall Astra, the crook lock, and the mirror. We may judge the driver not only by his violent attack, but also by his boss's threat. This suggests that he's not really ill, but is a malingerer. So tired and under the weather are not convincing, though weather here has an echo in the outlook for the day in the final stanza. And the driver is a coward. His argument is with his boss or his own way of life, but he attacks the hitcher, whose carefree values seem almost to mock him. The poem is arranged in 5 stanzas, each of 5 lines, and most end with a full or half rhyme. But the arrangement is more for the eye than the ear. The lines are not all end-stopped, and the poem read aloud sounds like natural speech. In reading the poem, do you agree with the views of the hitcher, or do you share the driver's annoyance of them? How does the poem suggest the selfishness of the driver? What other qualities does it show him to have? What do you think of the way Armitage uses contrast in this poem? What is the effect in the poem of proper nouns, places such as Leeds and Harrogate, and brand names such as Answerphone, Vauxhall, Astra, Crooklock, and of quoting from the radio, the weather forecast? Do these specific details add realism so the violence seems all the more shocking to the reader? Is this a serious poem, or is the violence meant to be comical? And why do you think this? What is the effect of the references to the sun and wind in the poem? What do the hitcher and the driver think of them? What might be the sequel to this story? What happens next? Why has the poet not told the reader this? Is the poem complete without it? Other poems that make good matches with this one are The Laboratory and My Last Duchess by Robert Browning, The Man He Killed by Thomas Hardy, and Education for Leisure by Caroline Duffy. They're all to do with killing.